Okay, it's recording now. So welcome everybody to our first ECT webinar. This is my first one that I've run as well. So my name is Emily Smeaton and I am the just new to the role ECT lead for York St John. So it's going to be kind of my job putting together some webinars, getting loads of brilliant people to come and have a natter to us, and putting together some newsletters as well, which is the first one going out this week. So I'm kind of new to the role, but have been working with ECTs for a very long time. So I'm really excited to kind of, hopefully this is a two-way thing. We're going to have a good natter today about working with parents, including kind of difficult, challenging conversations, those kind of, and talking about some kind of scenarios that can be quite tricky, and hopefully for any age from early years all the way to secondary, and whether you're ECT 1, ECT 2, whether you're supply teaching, whether you're searching for work, it will hopefully be applicable to all of you. Okay, so should we start? Oh, I'll introduce Jane as well. Jane, do you want to introduce yourself for anyone that doesn't know you? I'm sure they all know you though.
I think I would know most of you. I recognise a lot of the names here. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Jane, one of the senior lecturers is on the team, working alongside Emily. I do know people from the Contemporary Issues group, and I'm sure some of you all have seen me attempting to do RE primary, and those of you also might know my other guys, which is my secondary English teaching or PGCE work as well. So one of those you might know who I am, but I'm here to kind of offer maybe a secondary perspective as well.
Which is, thank you, Jane, so much for joining us, and thank you everyone else. I know you've kind of, whatever you've been doing today, it's a long day, it's 6 o'clock, so I hope you're all kind of sitting nice and comfy, and we really appreciate the time you've given, whether you're here right now or you're watching it recorded in your own time. So I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint all about working with parents, that's got some kind of top tips and a bit of evidence and a bit of chat, and Jane I think is just going to chip in as and when she feels applicable with a bit of a secondary kind of thing. Is that okay, Jane? So yeah. Brilliant. The intention is we'll do that for probably about 20 minutes, and we can have a good chat through there. We can pause and just have a chat again. If you've got any questions, pop them in, and Jane and I can have a bit more chat. And then I've also got a video of chatting to Lucy Sawes about our experiences as parents of children with special educational needs. Mine's in secondary and Lucy's in primary. So it's, as a parental, I think that's a really important. And then we're going to unpick a little bit more at the end and give time for any questions or anything like that. Equally, you can, if you want to be anonymous, you can email me from where you are now, and we can talk about what, if you've got a problem, you don't want to put it in the chat because your name's associated with it, that's okay as well. So hopefully this is going to work. We were practicing before, weren't we, Jane? So hopefully it's going to work. Okay. Is that okay? Can everyone see my screen?
I can.
Brilliant. Yes. Oh, thank you, whoever that is. It's always good when we get a yay or a no. So we're going to be really looking at working with parents. Now, when I say parents today, I'm referring to any carers, anybody, that family, that extended family, grandparents, a lot of our different kind of families that we work with. And we're going to be able to work with parents effectively to improve engagement in their children's learning. And that's really what we're looking at today, especially with their learning. So we're going to talk about the importance of effective relationships, opportunities that we can have to engage, communicate proactively, trusting relationships, and additional adaptive needs. So when I go through there, we can look at EAL, children with special educational needs. So a really importance of an effective relationship, and I really want to kind of look at this really clearly, because in the research, there is a real difference between the relationship that parents can have between school and parents. So we call this involved. So that might be attend parents' evening, come to trips, just signing forms, just being involved. So that's a relationship purely between the parents and the school. But then there's also a relationship, which is what we're aiming for, between parents and their children's learning. And that's where the magic happens. this is what we call as engaged. And this is the bit that we're really, really aiming for here. This is where we want them to be involved. We want them to be communicating, this relationship, this trust, this engage. And there's kind of differences there as well. So the involvement, if we look at this again, we're really aiming for engagement, but involvement can take place in school. It can be school-led activities. It's very school controlled. So we invite them in and they kind of do what we need them to do, but it's not sufficient enough to impact upon child's learning. So they're having no impact. And it's often used to determine if a parent's engaged. So on the surface, we can often think, oh, that parent's really engaged there. They come to all the staff meetings, all the parents' meetings. They come on trips. They're even on the governor's. But actually, that may be just involved. We're really wanting them to become engaged. And it's a really important first step, but shouldn't be the end point. Whereas engagement, this is where it takes place at home. This is where we're aiming for. And it's a really interactive process. And it really impacts upon learning. And this is what we're wanting it to do. And we can have parents that are heavily engaged with learning, but not visible in school. So they may not be involved, but they may be engaged. And I think you find that more in secondary, that there's lots of things going on at home within the home environment, but you may never see the parent or have communication with the parent. Would you say that, Jane, as well? You're kind of nodding there.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's worth thinking, about the parents and about their time. And quite often you'll get, probably towards the end of primary, I would think, parents who may have decided to work part-time or a kind of step back from their career at that point, do start to return to that. So there's kind of perceptions that an involved parent is a visible parent is a kind of dangerous one to have. But there are more reasons at secondary why you won't have involved parents. They may come to the parents' evening, but we don't invite them on trips very often at all, if ever. But certainly that doesn't mean that they're not engaged at home. Although it is it's a challenge, isn't it, in kind of being able to determine the extent to which they are engaged then, if they're not listening to you.
That transition is hard, I've gone through it, and I know you'll have gone through it, Jane, the transition as a parent of your child being in year 6, being really involved and going to trips and engaging in their learning, and then suddenly you're not as involved when you're in secondary. And some parents find that really hard, and you're probably secondary already, kind of we know there. But yeah, it can look quite different there, certainly. So the evidence is, and this is really interesting, that parents' interest and involvement in their children's learning is consistently associated with positive outcomes for children of all ages. So when they are engaged and they're supporting that learning, it does have an impact. And it can have an average of 2 to 3 months impact if it's done really well across a year. And what I find really interesting is this is completely regardless of their social economic status or ethnic background. And I think that's a really important point to make, that when we get families engaged, it can still have that impact. Really important. And I think this is essential, and I think it's a really good point. It's what the parent does with their child rather than who they are that makes the difference. And I think it's just us remembering that as well. But the behaviour, when parents value education and behaviours that support it, they're more likely, the children are more likely to share those values. So we know this, but equally, I think something to remember is that even if we have families that may not value behaviour and may not value learning behaviours, those pupils are going to be tomorrow's parents. So it's like improved social capital in that way. So if we can help the children see the value in behaviour, then when they become parents, they're going to improve the value. They're going to see that value. And I think that's, to me, it's got quite a bit of power, that one as well, that helps. So they're I did a quote, they're witnessing and experiencing how their schools treat their parents and how their parents treat the schools, and they're learning by example how parents are involved or engaged at school and at home in their education. So I think it's definitely worth it with the kind of future. But it certainly can be challenging, which is probably why a lot of you are here today. It's a really tricky thing as well. So one of the EF recommendations, and EF isn't all the be all and end all, but it's a really good place to go. And I will pop in the chat what I've been using for this so that you can, I'm clicking away quite loudly so that you can access this in your own time. So you need to critically review how you work with parents. Now, this can be hard when we're in ECT because, you know, some of these ideas are out of your control, but you can really reflect upon how you do it, your own practice as well. So you need to really develop a clear plan and audit your current practice. But I think a really essential thing is to listen to the less involved parents, give them a voice and try and understand why they're not involved. And equally, stop activities that have no clear benefits. So sometimes we can put huge amounts of time and effort, and we know how precious that is in class, to get parents engaged in their children's learning when actually it has no impact. So it's really weighing that up and making sure that you've kind of got a really good idea of that. And the evidence about how to improve attainment by increasing parental engagement is mixed, and it's less conclusive, which is why you need to be really good at monitoring the impact it's having, and different families need different things. And I think that's really essential. So looking on here, opportunities to engage. So parental engagement with children's learning is made up of lots of different elements. Any listing of which is bound to be incomplete due to variations among families. So there is definitely that engagement with learning is made up. It's so complicated. But care and the home learning environment are two kind of areas where activities that offer those learning opportunities to the children and to help support it. So things such as in early years, reading to the children. So doing that within, so modeling that to parents, singing nursery rhymes, things like that. Equally encouraging having friends round to play, social skills, things like that. But you've also got like visiting a library or more resource intensive activities such as painting or crafts and things like that. But really modeling that all is really essential. But it's really important also to note that it's not possible to give a full list of effective engagement activities, but it can give you an idea of concepts of engagement is found in what can be the most effective, and that what can be more effective for one family isn't the same for another. So it's you really knowing your families as well. But engaging parents, so helping parents to help. So some top tips here is really sharing goals and really having high aspirations for their children. And I think if we can just show parents that we care about their child, that in itself means a lot to parents, just that you want the best for them. And if they are struggling with behavior, that is a really common thing that you've both got in common, that you want the best for their child. You need to build parental confidence, and that takes time, especially with some of our families, some of our more challenging families. And I say challenging, I mean perceived to be more challenging by perhaps yourselves. But we need to build that parental confidence, and that takes time. I've been working with a pastoral team in secondary, and there was a guy telling me he's a pastoral lead, and he was saying about this family, and the attendance of the child was so low in secondary, and it's taken him 2 years to build up a relationship with this family, and now they're on the same idea. They've got the same aspirations for this girl. The dad's bringing her in when she doesn't want to come in. There's communication, there's a bit of banter, and that takes real time, but absolutely worth it. But it can be hard. Be clear about that contributory important role they play. So always respecting the fact that they are central to everything we do. And that can be hard, particularly in secondary when you don't have that communication as much. An honest, transparent and authentic approach to relationships. So I think that's really essential there. I don't know whether, Jane, you want to add anything to that.
I was just going to say, really, from point of view, when I worked at a pupil referral unit, alternative provision, and obviously we did some and had an opportunity to do more intensive work with the parents, but quite often the pupils were there, like, removed from mainstream, partly because the relationship with the parents had broken down really quite considerably over time, and there's a great deal of mistrust from some parents, and certainly in that environment there was a lot of examples of this, and perceptions of an education system that have failed them and then are failing their children, and concerns about being judged, concerns about people kind of thinking that they weren't somehow good enough as parents. So the importance of like that open and honest relationship is really important, but potentially recognizing how complex and difficult those parents might find that is really, really important also to think about, I think.
And I think as well, just remembering that we're dealing with their most precious commodity, their thing that they've got that's most precious to them, their children. And I think when things do go wrong with, children are struggling with their behavior or with their learning, it's so easy as a parent to take that personal, to think I've done something, and that's embarrassing, and that can be really, you go through a whole range of emotions. So I think us knowing that equally with parents, that is a roller coaster of emotions for them, but being really honest, being really transparent, authentic, I think goes a long way, and doesn't always work straight away, but you've just got to keep faith in it, really.
I think as well, just that kind of acknowledgement of the challenge of parenting goes a long way. Yeah. And obviously some of you will be and some of you won't be parents, but it doesn't stop us from kind of appreciating the complexities and the challenges of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think another recommendation is, if we are going to engage the parents in their learning, there's different skills that the evidence points at for different ages. So early years, a really big emphasis on oral language and self-regulation, so them regulating their emotions, which is huge. Early primary, really putting your efforts into working with parents, engaging them with that home learning on reading, letter sounds, word reading and counting and numbers. And I always think that's a lot for early primary. It's like year 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a lot for them sometimes. Later primary, going on activities that support reading comprehension. And then secondary, independent reading, but equally strategies that support independent learning. And I know a lot of secondaries equally working on those kind of revision skills, all of those kind of how recall skills, memory, how can we get huge, vast amounts of knowledge, retained. So that kind of can be a lot of kind of exam revision as well for that independent learning. So homework, parent support and encouragement of homework develops effective learning habits. So I always think homework should be more about developing those habits at home rather than completing the actual work. So things such as encouraging your child to set a goal to complete their homework, then planning how they're going to do it, where they're going to do it, getting, saying to them, you need somewhere nice and quiet. Should we do it at the library, or should we do it, I'll clear the table, things like that. Just perseverance, really modeling that to the children and helping parents, showing parents that this is a skill that they need to model to them. Management of time as well. If they do want to go out and play footy with their mates, can they do that afterwards, or do they get that straight after they come home from school and but then they come back and do their homework? Materials, needing pencils, things like that. Attentiveness and emotions as well, and how they can deal with their emotions. So I'm going through at the moment, my little boy's in year 1, and I'm going through that reading every night. I have to hit that balance between him coming home absolutely exhausted and not wanting to do anything, between him is having a bit of free time equally, and knowing we need to spend a bit of time every night doing this, and his emotions that are involved in that. A lot of perseverance, I think, from my kind of how, but showing parents how they may not want to do something. They may not want to practice their reading at home, or they may not want to practice their exam revision, but they've got to understand why they're doing it. So the recommendations is short, focused tasks or activity which relate directly to what is being taught, and quality rather than quantity. So I think the recommendation is not starting anything new, not introducing new learning. It can be something they've done in school, something they're really good at, so then they can take it at home. And equally, you're not relying on parents' skills. So if it is phonics, you're going to have a lot of parents that will not know what all those sounds sound like. They will not be able to know how to break that word up. So that's really essential that you give them something that they can do, that give them, which is why we send books home in early years and key stage 1 and 2, that the children can read those sounds, because you're not reliant upon that skill. Do you want to add anything there, Jane?
It's the same, really. Secondary, that kind of importance of making sure that the task is one that is recap and revision, really, revisiting ideas, moving things into the longer term memory, rather than trying to set kind of an additional task for the sake of it. So you've got to really kind of interrogate why you are setting it, and also helping parents understanding the rhythms more of a teenage brain can be quite helpful. The kind of ideas around how to combine that and the other things they might want to be going to do, like being online, and not seeing those necessarily as in competition with one another, but trying to look for homeworks potentially that can kind of feed into their interests as well. Kind of gamification of things can also be quite helpful for motivation for homework, but we've got to kind of also make sure that we've got the parents' kind of understanding of what's motivated our decisions for homework as well. So being very, very open in channels of communication with parents is important.
I think that is really essential. I was thinking back to the rhythm as well, as you were saying, and the understanding of the brain, because I was just thinking back to with my children, that kind of not getting them to practice reading and their words as they're going to bed, that's snuggle time and story time, because they're exhausted, their brains can't process. So it's knowing your child well enough to know when they're going to be at their best, but equally giving them a bit of time for their own kind of enjoyment as well. But some parents need real help with that and understanding that, and that skill of the effective learning habits at home has more impact than it does actually just achieving the homework, doesn't it?
And it might be, it might be about signposting them, because something that you'll get in secondary is resistance, of course. Parent asking their child to get on with something that they really want to do, and that will happen all the way through primary. But at secondary, it can be quite a point of conflict. So there are organisations that you can signpost them to, which will be local to your area, that help them to kind of support the child through that a little bit more effectively.
That's a really good point. That resistance and that motivation is so real, isn't it?
Yeah.
So parents' evening as well is we're really aware that you've got this coming up, whether an ECT 1 or 2. That this will be kind of coming round very quickly, and you'll be exhausted, whether it's before half term or after half term. You're on your knees, I'm afraid. But parents' evening is a really unique opportunity to engage the parents in their child's learning, to really get them engaged and supporting their child and giving them real particular strategies to do that. So just if they are practicing reading, that one tip of saying maybe do it as soon as they get home, or as soon as you get home from work, not leaving it until bedtime when they're tired, things like that, not turning the television off, getting rid of distractions. It's a really unique opportunity to build your relationship, and I think that's really essential, especially primary is very different than secondary, because we do see them on the gate all the time, maybe less so in key stage 2 as they start to become more independent, but a real opportunity to build that relationship. So for some secondary, this will be the only time really they'll see, whether it's online or face-to-face. Impart information about learning, equally learn from the parents. I think a top tip is always kind of begin with what would you like to kind of talk about? Is there any questions you've got? Do that at the start, because you don't have long. And really learn from them and say, oh, I'm finding that they find this really tricky, or they don't like to do this in class. What do you find at home? You know, really, it's a shared kind of partnership there, and the working partnership with parents. I think as well from secondary, I know something that's really important is kind of knowing just something really little personal. And I think this works for any age. Something personal about that child that's very unique to that child just lets that parent know that you care. So whether it's a child in your secondary class that constantly goes on about a football team, oh, they love that, don't they? They never shut up about that, you know, just something that's really unique to them. I think goes a long way. And it's the same with primary. You really need to show that you know their child. Do you want to add anything, Jen?
Yeah, just to say it can be, and you need to acknowledge that it can be massively challenging at secondary. So you don't have, you know, you have a parents' evening for each of your year groups, some of whom, depending on when it is in the year, you may have seen 3 or 4 times up to that point. So not making up or pretending things that you don't know, acknowledging the context of how often you've seen that, I think is absolutely, as Em says, brilliant to try and find a nugget or something that kind of says.
I just note them down, just a little kind of note next to their name of something
absolutely. So it might be that you
can't retain it, as you said.
Yeah, you might get the don't get the wrong child, although I've done that before. But try to kind of have things ready that you can control. So you might have a class of 30 you've met 3 times, have something about the curriculum that you're studying. Parents often feel very remote from the school experience in secondary in the way that they don't necessarily in primary. They want to know what they're doing in class. They don't assume that they're going to have told their parents anything about what they do at school, and just have things ready about the curriculum, and making sure that you're focusing in on the learning all the time. Okay, so children at the door, kind of looking. Bye, Luke. Sorry.
So, yeah. Oh, thank you for that, Jane. And that's life, isn't it? They kind of come in. Yeah. So that kind of tailoring your communications to really encourage positive dialogue. And it's more effective if it's personalized. So as Jane was saying, just that little nugget of personalization linked to learning, always bring it back to the learning, and it's really positive. That consider to be proactive as well about your frequency, your timing, your audience, when you're doing it. As you know, Jane hit on before, we've got parents that work part-time, full-time. I know secondary schools have become really good at sending out communications, and primary at like about 7 o'clock at night, just as you sat down, you get a text, because you can process it, you can read it and respond to it instantly. Whereas if you're at work on the pickup, you just can't do that. So in early years in primary, communications could really focus on activities they can do together. So like we were saying, that kind of home learning, facts, particular skills, tips for short, simple activities, and encourage and reinforce as well. Really, really important. And then this just goes on to this kind of partnership model. I won't spend too long on this, but it's Epstein's model of how important, if we look, that child really at the centre there. Absolutely pivotal. You've got the school, you've got the family, and you've got the community. And just how important parents are, we need to remember they're always at that centre of there, and it should be a two-way thing. And building, again, going on to that trusting relationship. And I think these are really good points, especially when you're dealing with parents who you perceive, and I say you perceive as challenging because they may not feel that they're challenging, but understanding parents, understanding that home environment, understanding that they may need a different approach. Talking face to face with some parents is really effective, with others it's not. An email suffices a lot better, a telephone call. Catching them in the morning when they're trying to drop off in primary sometimes is the height of stress and they can't quite respond. So you've got, but some parents it's perfect. So you've got to know your parents, and you will make mistakes and realize that actually it doesn't quite work. And I think equally that kind of if you're communicating the positive, as much as you communicate the negative, you've got to come with positive. Otherwise, every time they see your name or see your face, they're going to have that dread, thinking, what's he done and what's she done now? And being really approachable. So first impressions, really being smiley. We kind of know this, but being at the gate, being at the playground, ring to share those both positive and negatives. Do you want to add anything there, Jane?
Just really about ringing, and again, it is school policy. They'll tell you sometimes that you have to do follows up for particular behaviour. It's easy to get in the habit of always ringing about the negatives and not ringing about the positives, but also be mindful that if you get a parent who suddenly receives in the middle of a school day a phone call about their child, then they may well think there is something really significantly wrong with that child, because that might be something that is a concern for them. So making sure that the first thing you say very clearly is, rest assured there is nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong. Nothing's
happened. They're okay.
Talk to you about that. Yeah. And it might sound daft, but it can be quite alarming. I'm just thinking about it from a parental point of view. Someone who just wanted to tell me something really lovely about my child, but it just happened right in the middle of the day, and it's just like, well, what's wrong with them? What's wrong? So you just need to be careful of that as well.
I think it is knowing that. And I know that in primary, it's the majority of that face-to-face. And we will see them day to day, whether it's bumped heads or something's happened or they've had a little accident or something like that. But I do know in secondary, it depends on your setting, doesn't it? Sometimes it can be the pastoral, the Senko, yourself. But I always highly advise, I think schools, but it's making it manageable, Jane, as you were saying, you've got huge amounts of student numbers. But I think the advice is always to kind of keep that communication, because sometimes if it's the pastoral always communicating and it's always in your class, the problems, I think sometimes parents get an image or create something of you which isn't really right. They see you as the bad person.
I agree with that. I do think you have to be mindful as well that parent might, if you are going it alone in secondary, where they have got, 20 teachers, 5 of whom may have seen them that day and 5 of whom may really desperately want to speak to them. If they're getting 5 phone calls, one after the other, about something. So it might be worth checking pastorally whether or not this is kind of someone else is actually that day going to be speaking to them about something. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the way people start to build up perceptions of teachers that they hear about rather than speak for themselves. But it can be a really frightening first thing to do. ECT mentors will, I'm sure, very much help you to make those first tricky ones, or sit in and watch someone else do a real host of those if you're worried about them at all, because they can be quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think equally, what I always find really interesting is a parent may speak to you very differently than they'll speak to someone else. So sometimes you're like, oh, I do not like ringing them because I always get a real barrage, and somebody else be like, oh, I never get that. So equally, it's that respectful relationship that may have been built up over time. So you've got to allow that time as well. Really, really important. I think barriers around building this trusting and equal relationship as well, this kind of deficit beliefs. And I think we can be really guilty of these in educations, that we believe the parents are not supporting their learning at home, or the child's not trying hard enough. Or equally, I think this less so, it's a particular group's fault, ethnic, cultural, minority, geographical areas, a distinguishing characteristic. And sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, the parents aren't listening. Or using the term hard to reach. And I think we have to be careful with using the term hard to reach, because that infers that they're choosing not to be reachable, when actually there's a lot of reasons there, and their experiences are really into play there. Often, as Jane mentioned before, the parents' own experiences of school will kind of, they've had really negative experiences of school, or they saw their parents have that. That just stepping over the door is a really big issue to them, and they're very nervous and they don't like it. Or even that power struggle, they don't like that power struggle, when actually it should be a working in partnership. So these relationships take a lot of time, but I think we need to be really aware of those kind of deficit beliefs, but we can really offset them by being really personal, going back to being positive, active listening, just kind of really support, just really understand that they, you know, that you've got their child at centre all the time. Keep reminding them this isn't about us, this is about them and them at the centre, and we're doing everything to help them. And just trying to avoid that kind of, oh, they're a problem parent, or they never come to school, or they don't like my child, that kind of thing there. But yeah, I always find that quite an interesting one. So with additional adaptive support, and Lucy and I ever so slightly talk about this, that we do have families that need more sustained and intensive support when needed, and that's an absolute given. We do have families with that. But in order to do that, what you really need, work with your SENCO really closely to assess the needs, what kind of needs this family have. There's lots of agencies out there, particularly for very young children, and as Jane touched on, for the older children as well. Try and avoid that stigmatizing, that blame, that discouraging. Really share those expectations. Ask them, what's their aspiration? What's their expectation for their child? That sometimes, I think there's a big report done that they said a lot of children with SEND the parents never get asked that. Structured evidence-based programs. So again, your SENCO will help you with this, getting something in there that supports them, but plan carefully, and visits for older children as well. That's really a really good one, but time is, just as we know, it's crazy, but definitely worth its weight in gold if you can get into some of these parents that need. So parents with SEND, parents of children with SEND, is participating as fully as possible with decisions. Sorry, I should have put, that should be children with SEND. They're not parents of SEND children. Participating as fully as possible in the decisions and being provided with information and support necessarily to kind of partake in these decisions as well. Being asked, how can we all help? How can we engage the learning? And that real importance of those aspirations and those high expectations, and focus on parent conversations on outcomes all the time. What are we aiming for? How are we going to get there? And that really supports that. I don't know whether, Jane, you want to add anything into that little bit?
No, I mean, I think it is one of the things that causes one of the most significant breakdowns between parents and schools, and there's a lot of kind of coverage of this at the moment in the news. There are lots of parents who feel really disenfranchised and kind of disconnected from the education system. And it's quite interesting that when you talk to the people who are having feel like their children are having a good time and are well supported, it's often that the channels of communication between them, both sides of them, parent and school, are really, really strong, and that they are schools that are asking specifically how, like, learning from the parents about what that child needs, and they are the absolute first port of call to understand the needs of those children. And then it's been about being honest about what reasonable adjustments actually look like, and whether they're feasible and manageable, and that will look slightly different in primary and secondary.
And I know, as a parent of a child, because I don't know whether we're going to get onto Lucy and I's video, which is okay. I think we were having that chat as a child of a parent that my child has special educational needs. Sometimes in parents' evening, when just the teacher mentions about one kind of adjustment that they're making to their learning and that support, that means the world to me. Just when they say, oh, I make sure I give a little bit of extra time with processing because I know she finds that hard. That to me is just like the golden nugget there as a parent, to go, yeah, they're giving that, as you say, reasonable adjustment. And that's what we've got to be really clear with parents, isn't it? Because I mean, there's loads of things we could do, but what's reasonable that we can manage with the class is really important. But yeah, it can be quite difficult. EAL parents as well, some real tips for communicating with parents who speak minimal English. The advice is that you need to ask about language preferences with them. This can be very difficult. You can get interpretation services, but just asking them what they would prefer, because there's kind of but equally knowing what systems you've got in school, your mentor will be able to help with that, whether you can kind of key into an interpretation service there. It always says never ask the child to translate, which is a really interesting one, because I think sometimes that communication can get lost, especially if you're talking about the child. That can be really difficult. Can you tell me what your mum said or what your dad said? So they always advise not to do that, not to put the child in the centre. Get to know the family and their culture, really understand that, and make sure they know their culture and their language is important, that it's valued. And that it's really important. And at the bottom it was show. So lots of kind of showing them how they can do things, and that can support as well. So conclusion very quickly, always aim for engagement in the learning. It's different than involvement, work in partnership, and then there's just those kind of recommendations there. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then has it gone back, Jane? Are we there?
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know whether anyone has got any kind of anything that they want to kind of ask or come through and kind of mention at all. It's always the tumbleweed moment.
So means you've been very
a scenario I had was a student saying about how they had a really tricky situation with a family where at parents' evening they've been talking to them about their child was making great progress, and they were saying, you know, they're doing really well, making great progress, really pleased with them, a really positive parents' evening. And then they got to the end of the year and they'd written their report, and on their report it had commented on that they weren't working at the expected level, and the parents had complained about them and said, this wasn't communicated with us. You said about that they were making really expected progress, really good progress. And I think it's about us being really mindful with parents of the language we use. So particularly when we're talking about children with special educational needs or children that are not at the expected standard, being really very clear and honest with that. Some parents, you need to keep repeating it. They're not at their age-related expected level. However, the progress that they are making themselves is really good progress, and really unpicking that with them, because I think it's hard for some parents to think, I've heard they're making good progress, but then I get a report at the end saying that they're actually not working where they can. We need to be really honest, and I think parents' evening can be hard for kind of being, especially when it's a family who you might be a little bit find intimidating or you're unsure about. And I think we need to still be really honest, because it doesn't do the child or yourself any favors. And then when they move on to the next teacher, they break that to them and are honest, and it's like, oh, well, where's that come from? So I think honesty is my tip there. I don't know whether Jane, you want to add anything to that scenario.
I was just thinking about the difficulty of engaged parents. So we're seeking out, aren't we, these involved, engaged relationships, but actually sometimes the more engaged, some other kind of challenges raise their head, and it kind of around that sort of thing, where they have perceptions that either they've been told something, or they perceive their child to be making more progress, or you know, in the case of one of my friends, actually doing the homework of their child, and was delighted the other day to receive a merit for it. So, but I you know. It's interesting, isn't it, to try and unpick. I think that's quite challenging. And the other thing that's challenging is that you might sit down and expecting a really lovely conversation because you've had nothing but hugely positive interaction with that child, and then the parents just come in with something you weren't expecting, and you've just got to try to, like you would with your group of your pupils and students in front of you, not to take things heart.
Yeah.
To understand that yes, this type of parent is going to be that type of parent to everybody, and not necessarily
not take. And I think one top tip I kind of learnt with parents who perhaps do come in very, very, very shouty, very, you know, and we're professionals. They need to respect us in that way. That's really important. And if there is a parent you have like that, just always make sure you're never on your own with them. Make sure that you're not in a room on your own. And I think a top tip there is, if a parent is very emotional, if they've come to you at the end of the day because of an incident or they've heard about something, I always say to them, right, what I want you to do is just say, I haven't got time right now and I really want to listen to you because everything you're saying is so important and I want to make sure I don't miss a thing. So go and write everything down that you're not happy with. Do a list, because I know you don't want to miss anything out. Do a list of everything you're not happy with, and let's get something in the diary tomorrow. And I can 10 out of 10 say to you that parent will come back, they will be calmer, they will have reflected upon whatever's happened. They don't tend to bring a list. You know, some of them do, but they tend to have just processed and reflected, and they're in a much better mindset for you to have a conversation. And again, say, I want to listen to everything. What's the problem? What's happening? I don't want to miss anything, and really value that. But I think diffusing a situation with time is really essential. If you do know you have parents that aren't, you know, are quite like that, you need to let your mentor know, let your head teacher know, because we can't put up with it as a profession. But equally, make sure you protect yourself. I always love that the first ECT year I did, the head teacher said, always make sure there's a table between you and the parents. I was like, oh my God, what am I dealing with here? And never had to do that, because I think that relationship you need to really build up so you don't get to that point. But there's still, and equally, I think, as Jane was saying, not taking it personally, you've got to remember that some of these parents have mental health issues. They have things going on at home. They may have financial pressures. It may be nothing to do with you or their child, but they are taking it out on you. And you've got to remember that sometimes, that it's bigger than you sometimes, but it doesn't excuse it, but it makes you feel it's not as personal.
It's worth also just, diffusing things with acknowledging their reality. So you don't have to take any responsibility or accept any blame or anything like that makes you feel uneasy. But you are accepting that is the way that they're perceiving things, that is the reality for them. So it's, very sorry that you feel like that, or that you know that's how you feel this situation is unfolding. And I think that goes a long way to not dismissing them. And also absolutely having a bit of an open mind. Sometimes they can say things that really do make you think a little bit differently about the things that you've been doing, or kind of query whether or not there are other things that you could be doing that better support that particular student. So, but I absolutely agree with Emily's sense of, if you can, get it to a point where it is on your terms to be having that conversation, so that you can feel that you're going in there with some facts and some information and maybe some advice before you go in. Then do what you can to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think that kind of just saying to them, like you just said, Jane, just to say, I want to just go and check. I want to get as much information as I can and talk to anyone else involved, so that I can come to you with as much information, is really essential, because you don't want to be kind of caught on the back foot there, really. But sometimes we are, and we're dealing with their most precious things, and that's important, isn't it? It's really important to remember. But yeah, I think so. I hope that's kind of helped a little bit with everything, working with families, and kind of just keeping an eye on the impact it has, because that impact as well can be quite hard to measure and to see. And you can kind of, if you're noticing that it's actually helping the child's learning, whether they're practicing their reading more or something like that, or their revision techniques got better if it's in secondary or things like that, really share that as well with the parent, because there's nothing, if they're doing something and it's having an impact, I think it's always really important for them to know that actually really making that link. They've done so well with their reading, and look at their progress. And that isn't just down to what we've done in class. That's because you practice every single night. Make that really explicit, because there's nothing like, as a parent, absolutely putting your head into loads of homework and home learning and really doing a lot and it not being acknowledged. So I think that's really essential as well. I don't know whether, Jane, you want to give any last kind of tips or anything?
Well, my brain is just, I think I did have something, and then my brain is just completely switched off at that moment in time.
It's got to that time of night, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, oh yeah, no, just, it goes a long way to, you know, how praise goes a long way, doesn't it? And there's a phrase I used to use, which was that, you know, your child is a credit to you and to themselves. So you kind of make sure you acknowledge that that child is independent in secondary, making decisions for themselves, but just really, really appreciating what parents can bring to that dynamic is really good. And it is lovely as a parent to just hear that as well, because it can feel a very thankless job, as I'm sure those of you who are parents know. And that often means that, you know, remember all those parents that say nice things to you as well. I keep a little folder called nice emails, because on those days where things are just a bit tough, sometimes I might just go and have a look at nice emails people have sent me, and that actually goes quite a long way.
And in primary, it's always little presents and cards. That's what we get, and just popping them up, because I think that's a really good tip. But yeah, I think okay, I'm going to leave it there, because I think I'll leave 5 minutes if anybody that's in the chat wants to just kind of chat about something else that's different, or check on something. Again, you can put it in the chat, or you can email me. I've got my I can have a little look discreetly, so we can kind of go through that, if that's okay. But equally, if you're exhausted, you haven't had your tea yet and you want to just go, that's okay. But I really appreciate all of you that are here, that have taken time out, you've come, so thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you, Jane, as well. So I'll leave it just to open. It'd be nice to see any faces. I'll stop the recording. So let me just go stop recording, then we can, there.